Almost there. Hey, folks, thanks for tuning into the Banff Podcast. I am your sunburned host, Mike Lafferty, here today with frequent guest Craig Campbell. How you doing, Craig?
Good. Burn victim. Whoa. You doing all right?
Yeah, well, we're closer to the sun here in Colorado, so got a little
Sure.
Hey, Craig, you know what time it is?
It's Kickstarter time for me.
It is also cheesy intro music time.
Yes.
1 second. That assures you, gentle listeners, that you are partaking in a high quality, a high production value podcast, finest farm to table podcast. Hey, there's our friend El Bezadente. How you doing, Bear? Good to see you.
Hello.
Well, hey, let's talk about Good Strong Hands. It was a very successful RPG you did like a year ago. Was it 2?
Year and a half, a little over a year and a half, something like that. Okay. Yeah, it's been out for a while. It was in contention for and was nominated actually for a couple of Ennies last year. So in August, Gen Con of last year, and we talked about that. We came on and with me, you talked to me and Pete.
Yeah, I just wanted to refresh it in the memory of our short remembered listeners. So it was inspired by such movies as Legend with Tom Cruise and The Dark Crystal and Labyrinth. And now we have a follow-up to that called What is Light Without Dark? And I will share the Kickstarter page and you can tell us what that's about.
Sure. Well, Good Strong Hands is, the core game. This is a supplement for that, so it requires the core game. But with the Kickstarter, you can get the core game. So if you missed out last time, you've got it there. And the core game introduces a bunch of types of folk that you can play when you're portraying these fantastical creatures who are battling to save their world from being destroyed by the void. Which is this faceless entity of entropy and destruction that comes through every couple centuries and tries to wipe the world out. And so it's the never-ending story. It's the nothing, right? It's just renamed as the void. And the game presents the world of reverie, which is the world that these characters inhabit. What is Light Without Dark introduces various realms and kingdoms that have been torn asunder from reverie, because in these ongoing battles with the void has won some of the battles, and it's torn realms and kingdoms out of the voids, thrown them off into the ether, disconnected them from the world of reverie, and with them sometimes whole cultures and kingdoms of people. So the game, the supplement has additional folk that you can play, some magics and things that you can wield that are kind of lost with them in these other realms, and then information on those realms themselves. So you can travel from the world of reverie to these other places, including information about how to get there and get back. And what were to happen and perhaps how, like suggestions for how you could potentially rejoin these realms with reverie and strike a blow against the void by making the world of reverie more whole again.
Well, that sounds like a good setup for a campaign. I'm guessing I'm looking at some of the folk right here. Let me zoom in. Can you tell us a little bit about them?
Sure. The Clockworks are clockwork people who were created initially by the Brownies, which is a folk from the core game. And then in time, the Brownies kind of released them, let them be, and the Clockworks went off and established their own home and culture. But they also were very wary of the fact that they were kind of created by these other folk and they didn't want to fall to servitude or anything like that. So they kind of insisted upon their own home, and that home is now kind of off in one of these realms that got torn away. Bogies are fey creatures who their people, their leaders ages ago made a deal with the void to save the entire race of bogies. And so the void tore their homeland out and put it in this other place. And it wasn't a good deal for them. It's a realm called Nightmare. It's really terrible.
Mm-hmm.
There are many bogies who are still in league with the void, but many who are now freedom fighting from within that terrible realm.
Okay.
Dragonettes are in good strong hands. Dragons are fierce monsters, but dragonettes are born of the imagination of children who wish to meet a dragon someday. So they're smaller and they're more friendly.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Patchworks are the result of some of these realms that got torn away. There were peoples who were of different types, and when the realms were torn away, they got patchwork together. They got mixed from their lost folk. The Rootkin are actually they called their home is a realm called Tangleroot, which is actually Tangleroot has existed alongside the Reverie all along. And Tangleroot is kind of like the upside down,
Mm-hmm.
the world that exists underneath and upside down to Reverie. So it's rather than being a world of plains and mountains and forests and lakes, it's a realm of pits and tunnels and swamps and the root can live there. And then vestiges are the spirits of heroes who fell to the void in the fight long ago, but who are still restless and wish to finish the fight.
Oh, well, that's kind of romantic. All right, cool. So you are doing really well. Scrolling to the top, it looks like you funded almost immediately, and you still got most of the month left.
Yeah, funded in the first day. Looking to just add some PDF support material stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The game book, the supplement itself is more or less finished. It's ready to go. So this will be a pretty quick turnaround for people who won't have to wait months and months for a Kickstarter to fulfill. Sometimes that happens.
That's always
nice. This one's really very much ready to go. I gambled up front, and I'm just looking to kind of cross my fingers and basically get enough backers to kind of reimburse myself and make sure that it's not actually costing the company money long term.
This is the first time I can recall you doing a sequel since Capers.
Well, I did a little supplement for Die Laughing on BackerKit just a little while back.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. This is the first time there's been one on Kickstarter for a while. I did a Die Laughing 2, which is just an expansion of Die Laughing with additional characters to play and monsters to have kill your character, and a few other bits and pieces. But it's kind of, this year is kind of turning into like the year of the sequel, the year of the supplement, the year of the this year is going to kind of reward people who have been fans of Nerdburger games for years, because they're getting support for some of the earlier games.
Awesome. Can you tell us a little bit about the system that we use for Good Strong Hands, and thus for this game as well?
Sure. It's a custom developed system for Good Strong Hands, which has now been actually modified mildly and used in a couple of other games. But it's called the roll track system, and that'll become apparent from when I describe things. You've got 4 traits for your character: body, mind, charm, and heart, and they all kind of cover what you think they cover, what they sound like. And if you're going to attempt to do something where there's a chance of failure, you will make a trait check that appropriate, whichever trait it is, and those traits will be ranked between 1 to 4. And you'll roll a number of d6s equal to that rating, shooting for target numbers of 4, 5, or 6, depending on the complexity of what you're doing. And if you, in conjunction with that, with the roll, there's your character has 3 tracks, which are basically just pools of points, right? Mm-hmm. The skill track, and if you fill the skill track up, you advance your character. Mm-hmm. There's the spirit track, which is a currency that you can use you can spend those points to gain bonuses. You can gain extra dice. You can use it to activate abilities, things like that. And then there's the shadow track, mm-hmm. which if you fill that up, you gain a corruption, where the void, basically the void tries to turn you into a servitor of it. And so
it's to the old dark side points.
Kind of. when you're making trait checks, if you roll your multiple d6s, if you get no successes, you fail at the thing you were trying to do. There's a complication that propels the story in some way, and then you mark the skill track. So failure leads to advancement. If you succeed and get one success exactly, you do the thing and you mark a spirit, so you gain that currency. And then if you succeed with 2 or more successes, you succeed to do the, you perform the task, and then you gain a boon, which is like you do it better, you gain something extra. And then you also mark a shadow, because when you do something really wonderful like that, the void notices you trying to be a hero. And seeds you with this shadow, with this spark of corruption. And as you build up the points in shadow, eventually you'll gain a corruption. And corruptions they're a power that you can use, but there's a cost to them. They're usually pretty ugly, and like the corruption, gaining corruptions becomes kind of a spiral toward losing your character. So you have to be careful.
Understood. Just put the link for the Kickstarter in the comments. I got scrolling on a banner below, but if you're listening to us on iTunes, you can't see those things. So tinyurl.com/lightwithout is how you can get to this Kickstarter. Fully funded, knocking out stretch goals right now. 24 days left as of today, which is April 30th. So jump on the bandwagon. It is definitely a good time. Fun system. Really enjoyed reading this book. I was a backer on the last Kickstarter. I'd like to get a chance to play this at some point. Maybe one of the we used to do lunchtime actual plays on the Banff podcast. Maybe we should bring those back. And it seems like I always acquire a bunch of Kickstarter games that
yeah.
And then just actually organizing the play sessions for them is a bigger challenge than anything else. So
I'm right there with you. I've collected enough games that I just never get a chance to play. I some of them I read outright. I read quite a bit. Some of them I skim. I kind of get a sense of everything. But there's just too much. There's too many fun games out there, and just not enough time.
There's a lot of content. That's my point of view is always to write your games as if they're going to be primarily for a reader audience. Obviously, you want people to play them. But there's so many folks like you and I who wind up reading a lot of our library and not playing as nearly as much as we want, that I think you need to make it as enjoyable experience as possible for people who are just, reading on the page.
Yeah. I mean, that I've long been a believer that there are many types of fun to be had from a role-playing game, and playing it is certainly one of them. Reading it is one of them. Just getting into the story, if the setting is just your thing, you just want to be immersed into a world, there's maybe you only look at that. Some people just dig on rules, they just want to read the crunchy stuff. Some people just they find a game that they love the concept for, and they think the art is wonderful, and they love just being able to see all the art. There's a lot of different ways to enjoy them.
Yeah, that's true. All right, so the first stretch goal I'm seeing here is a form fillable PDF character sheet, which is super handy, especially in these days of online play. And awfully close. It's 4,500, and if I'm not mistaken, you are less than $200 away from that right now. So that could happen in the next day or so, or heck, even in the next hour if we have a particularly large backer come in. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, yeah. For in the game, each of the characters is basically a playbook. It's like the book is a 6x9 book, and it's 2 pages that describes everything about the character. And this is one of those things that one of the concepts behind developing the game was to make it so that you could generate a character as a player in 5 minutes.
Nice.
So you've got everything compact for this type of character can do all of these things. Here's everything on those 2 pages. So you can you assign some points, make a few choices, and you're off and running. And so we did that with the core game folk as well, and we're gonna looks like we'll do that with these two, where we'll basically create a form fillable version of each character sheet. So you've got box, you can fill in the numbers and you can check boxes, and especially for a game where you've got these tracks that you're constantly marking and unmarking check boxes, it's handy to be able to just do that quickly rather than constantly scraping paper off of the page with erasers.
Understood. That's pretty cool. So are the future stretch goals after this still kind of TBD, or can we tease some of those to our listeners?
Well, I'm toying with a couple of ideas. There's nothing that's going to add page count or content to the book because that turns into nothing that's going to take time to design and play test or lay out and edit and all that sort of thing. So because we're looking to kind of turn this around as quickly as we can. So the book is 80 pages, which is pretty solid for a nice little supplement. But there may be something coming down the road. I'm going to kind of see how everything goes and what might be a fun stretch goal to throw in there.
Oh, sweet. Sounds awesome. Well, once again, folks, tinyurl.com/lightwithout is where you can find the Kickstarter. You can also just go to Kickstarter and search for what is Light Without Dark, and it shows up right there. 24 days left, already funded. Craig makes fun games. You should check this out. You won't regret it. Craig, it's really good having you on. I've been so chuffed with your success over the last few years. Congratulations on everything going so well for your company.
Thank you. And I appreciate that. Thank you for backing some of the games. I know you've been a very big supporter with backing and with just general kindness on the social medias and everything, and having me on the BAMF podcast every so often. It's good stuff. I'm pleased with how this is going. This is one of those things that I say, like every designer says, like they love all their games. All their products, all their supplements, everything. They love them all equally, but Good Strong Hands is kind of the baby that I love the most. Because
if you're being honest, there is always one, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I've come to recognize some of the reasons why, and one of the big ones is that I didn't play RPGs when I was in high school and junior high and everything. It took until college before I did that, and that happened in the 90s. But I really enjoyed these 80s fantasy movies. And it was my love of those 80s fantasy movies that then made me think, when somebody introduced D&D to me, that I'm going to try this out because I love those movies. I'll play this game and see what that does, and that turned into a roller coaster of all sorts of different things that happened that ultimately led me to designing my own games. And so, like, having Good Strong Hands kind of be the homage to sort of the thing that started it all when it came to fantasy stories. And I wanted to do a supplement for very long, all along, and I was always kind of not sure. And then it got nominated for an Emmy, and I was like, screw it, pull the trigger, let's go. So got this into production like right after Gen Con last year. It was kind of a fast-tracked project.
Oh, sweet. Are there any fantasy movies or other content you're into right now these days?
Oh boy, what am I into right now? I actually was watching The Two Towers today. Which I, go back and revisit those, the Lord of the Rings stuff every so often.
In my head, that just came out a couple of years ago.
Yeah, no kidding. It's been 20. Yeah. But I think the genre stuff that I'm most into right now lately has been Super's kind of stuff. I'm watching, I don't watch everything that Marvel puts out, but I've been watching a fair amount of the Marvel stuff. I've watched The Boys, which is an acquired taste, or perhaps not a taste that's not everybody wants to necessarily have. But so I've been watching that. Fantasy movies, and I watch. I've seen all the big franchise stuff. That's kind of the weird thing with fantasy movies nowadays is that it tends to be franchise stuff. There's you don't see the one shot fantasy. Just kind of out of nowhere movie, or at least it doesn't get as big, it doesn't get as widespread of a release as what you had in the 80s when that's kind of all you had.
Yeah, you just get occasionally a weird little movie like Sword and Sorcerer or Krull or, oh god, trying to remember this one about
Willow. Willow suddenly got some love with a short series, but Willow is one of those movies that inspired all of this with Good Strong Hands as well.
Did you see the streaming series on that one?
I started to watch it and I kind of fell away from it. I will almost certainly return to it at some point when I'm ready to just kind of sit down and punch through the whole thing. I've hit this time with my life where it takes the right show for me to be a weekly watcher. You know, if I'm going to get into something and watch it weekly. I did that with Quantum Leap, with the sequel kind of follow-up series for Quantum Leap. I was watching that every week rather than waiting. But with a lot of stuff, I wait until it's all available, and then I kind of binge through a few episodes at a pop here and there, and just kind of crunch through it all in a couple of weeks. So that's probably what's going to happen with the Willow series. At some point I'll be like, okay, I've got a weekend. I don't have a lot going on. There's like 6 or 8 episodes, and I'll punch through the whole thing.
I appreciate that. I was listening to this novel lately on Audible, and it I won't say it reminded me of Good Strong Hands, but it's maybe it's kind of a cozy feel-good fantasy about an orphan to retire and run a coffee shop.
Nice.
Yeah, it's I'm not sure I mean, the great thing about the fantasy genre, author Travis Baldree, I mean, it's very flexible, and it's been, I mean, there's a million different variations on it, different kinds of flavors, and this is definitely more of the cozy, Jessica Fletcher, she's
Sure.
out, kind of vibe. There's a whole chapter about, hey, they find a ratkin, and he's their baker, and he's a genius. It's it's low stakes for the most part, but yeah, it's I have some friends who are very disdainful of that kind of stuff getting into the fantasy genre, but it's a flexible genre. It can handle all kinds of different sorts of stories. So
that's the case with a lot of genre stuff, like supers and fantasy and sci-fi. Is there's really no such thing as a fantasy movie. There's a drama that is in a fantasy world. There's a comedy that is in a fantasy world. An action movie that is in a fantasy world.
Yeah,
it's more a setting than anything, and you can have great drama with magic and monsters. You can have great drama with spaceships and warp drive.
Well, I mean, there's been a subgenre of murder mysteries for years called cozies.
Sure.
Which, it's like Jessica Fletcher, but in written form, and this is kind of that treatment, for fantasy. Actually, it's a lot like that 2000 movie Chocolat. I think it might have won an Oscar, but everyone seems to have forgotten about it.
Sure.
This lady comes to a harsh town in France, and she opens a chocolate shop, and she befriends the locals, and Johnny Depp shows up as a river gypsy, and they have a little romance, and that's pretty much the entire movie. There's one fire at one point, and that's the obligatory source of drama, but it's the same kind of movie, but same kind of story, but then in fantasy. Anyway, that was a tangent. I apologize, sir.
Well, it's okay. It's like a slice of life movies, slice of life stories, where it's less about the like the big character arc or whatever, or the big action thing, or the big conflict. It's more about like just seeing a snippet of these lives.
Yeah, I think there's room for those stories
kind
too.
of going on that trip for a little while.
Yeah, and I mean, if I'm going to get critical, there's an awful lot of fantasy that's about, oh, we have to save the insert blank because of the blank.
Yeah,
and, it's nice to get things that are got a smaller focus. But anyway, folks, check out Craig's Kickstarter. I'm going to back it here once we sign off. Craig, always a pleasure talking to you. Any closing thoughts before we wrap things up?
Oh boy, go back and watch those 80s fantasy movies. Go back, watch The Never-Ending Story again. I had a good excuse to rewatch a bunch of those when I was designing Good Strong Hands. It's been a couple of years. I may go back and rewatch them, a couple of them myself.
It's definitely a good way to spend an afternoon.
Yeah.
All right. Well, on that happy note, folks, thanks for checking out the BAMF podcast, and we will catch you next time. See ya.
Bye.